I'd like to thank everybody for coming this evening and welcome to a presentation on the referendum which will be voted on by the residents of the city of Carver. We have two presenters this evening, Larry Harris and David Lamarty. Larry Harris is a partner at the law firm of Melkert, Hubert, Shodin, and has been Carver's city attorney for the last 20 years. Raised in Victoria, Minnesota, Larry received his BA in Business Administration from Creighton University and his JD from Creighton University Law School. Larry joined the law firm in 1979. David Lamarty is currently the first Midwest Regional Director for the International City County Management Association, otherwise known as the ICMA. The ICMA's mission is to create excellence in local government by developing and fostering professional management to build better communities. David has been involved in local government for over 30 years, most recently as the city manager of Highland Park, Illinois. In addition, David is a member of the adjunct faculty at Northwestern University, instructing in the areas of public finance and budgeting. David received his BA in Political Science from Marquette University and his MA in Public Administration from the University of Kansas. Please help me welcome Larry Harris and David Lamarty.
Thank you very much for that. I'm Larry Harris. I am the first presenter this evening. I'm the city attorney for Carver, and I'm going to do the more boring part of the presentation. I'm going to provide information about the statutory scheme of government in Minnesota, what are known as Plan A and Plan B cities. I'll try and explain what Carver is now and talk about what would change if Carver became a Plan B city, and talk a little bit about the process on how that would work if the electorate votes to become a Plan B city. Carver is presently a statutory city. Most cities in the state originate as statutory cities. Minnesota has a comprehensive Local Government Act, Chapter 412, that establishes cities as statutory cities. A statutory city is a requirement for any city with a population of less than 1,000. If a city has a population of more than 1,000, it can elect to become a Plan B or a city manager city. A statutory city, which is what Carver, the form of government that Carver currently operates under, has 4 council members and 1 mayor. The council appoints statutorily a clerk treasurer. The council also appoints all the commission members, Planning Commission, Parks in Carver, the HPC, the Heritage Preservation Commission. The council has the ultimate authority over personnel, and the council has all administrative authority in addition to legislative authority. The city council may but need not appoint an administrator. Carver has had a full-time administrator since at least the early 1990s. Cindy's giving me the quizzical look. I think Glenda came in about 1994. Was she part-time? In a Plan B city, which is a city that operates under the city manager form of government, there are 4 council members and a mayor. The council appoints a city manager. What's different is the council has legislative and policy decision roles. The council acts in a quasi-judicial manner, but the council doesn't have the majority of the administrative functions. So what the council does in a Plan B city what it does is it passes ordinances, it legislates, it makes overall policy decisions, and then it acts as a permitting authority where it makes decisions on applications that come before it, where the council acts in a quasi-judicial function and is effectively the decision maker. What it no longer does is it doesn't administrate. The single most significant change in Minnesota between a statutory city and a Plan B city that operates under a manager is that all of the personnel, hiring, assignment of duties are done by the city manager. They're not done by the council. The example that I will give to people in this room is Glenn can't call Paulie Schultz and say, plow the sidewalk in front of my house. He might still do that, but it becomes a hierarchy that we're used to seeing, a flow chart where everybody reports up through a chain to the city manager that is appointed by the city council, rather than having the city council have direct personnel authority. That is, in my experience, the primary reason why cities move to Plan B form of government. Plan B form of government is relatively common, but certainly not universal. Around here, cities like Chaska, Chanhassen, Excelsior, and Victoria are a Plan B city, but Waconia still operates, Waconia's got 12,000 people, still operates as a statutory Plan A city. Other distinctions. Because the manager, the city manager who's appointed by the council, is responsible for all administrative activities of the city, the manager then reports to the council on those activities rather than having the council directly involved in the administration. The manager then also has control over all the departments or divisions of the city. So, examples, public works, utilities, administrative staff, fire, would all report up through a chain to the city manager. The manager is responsible for enforcing statutes related to the city and city codes and ordinances. So the city manager would have the authority to determine whether the city should prosecute or move forward on a nuisance violation, to determine whether the city should take certain actions, which right now all have to go up to the city council. By statute, there's a fairly broad range of additional powers that the council could, if it so chose, delegate to the manager. The big issue, and one of the big things to realize, is that in a Plan B city, my joke to Mr. Henry aside, council is no longer involved in personnel. They don't direct personnel activities. They literally step out of that, and the city manager takes care of those issues. A little quirk in Minnesota law, in a Plan B city, the council technically assumes responsibility for the parks, but the statute does allow the appointment of an advisory park board or commission. I suspect that change, or that statutory twist, would have no impact on Carver. There would still likely be a Parks Commission that would operate as before. In a Plan B city, the manager has authority to act as a purchasing agent, and all contracts which are not in excess of $20,000 and all purchases may be established directly by the city manager. What that means is that routine purchases and routine contracts, which now all come to the council for approval, get handled by the city administrator. It takes the city council out of that administrative function and puts that administrative function in the hands of somebody who deals with it on a day-to-day basis, who's negotiating with the vendors and has the relationship and the expertise in those matters. Not to say the council isn't experienced, but it takes a lot of the mundane day-to-day operations away from the council. In a Plan B city, the manager prepares the budget, but the council is still the approving authority. In this city, that's probably not a change. In a larger Plan A city where there's a finance director, the finance director would prepare the budget, but in this case, I don't expect it would be a significant difference in Plan A or Plan B. There are some statutory limitations on what the council can do to increase amounts which are fixed in the budget, to either add or subtract. Basically, the premise in Minnesota on a Plan B city is that The minor adjustments to the budget and to purchasing are done by the manager. Those small adjustments don't come back up to the city council. The manager has a statutory obligation to specify the city fund, the various enterprises fund from which each payment is made. That's probably not a significant change from how the city currently operates. A city manager is slightly different than a city administrator. Although the city manager serves at the pleasure of the council, which is also true with the city administrator, and the city manager can be removed by the city council after the manager has been in place for a year. That manager has the right to demand written charges and a hearing if the council seeks to remove the manager. In my experience, that doesn't happen, but that's what the statute says. All right, adoption of Plan B and how and where this comes from. I think, first of all, it's important to realize that the thought to go to a Plan B form of government has been originated by the city council. This is something the council has been talking about for the better part of this year. In order to move to Plan B, there is a referendum requirement. It has to be voted on at an election, and that election question is scheduled for the November election. The council adopted a resolution calling for the Plan B form of government to be put to the voters of the city several months ago. It's a simple majority. If a majority of the voters voting at the election, at the general election in November, approve the ballot question, which is should the city of Carver move to a Plan B city manager form of government, that form of government then comes in place. It technically comes in place immediately. It practically comes in place after the council takes action to hire a city manager. The Plan B form of government does not statutorily convert the existing city administrator into a city manager. The council has to formally make the appointment after the ballot question passes, assuming it passes. If the city decides it doesn't like Plan B form of government and wants to go back to a statutory city and just have a city administrator, it can do so. But there's one twist. You have to wait 3 years. If you move to Plan B, you have to give it a trial period. I've not seen a city go back, but you would have the right to do so. Here's a list of some cities around that operate under the management form. In my experience, I see cities start looking to go to the city manager form of government as their population approaches 5,000. There's all sorts of issues. Thank you. And it's not just the MSA state aid dollars that come at the $5,000 limit. A city by that point has enough of a critical mass, and there are enough personnel and administrative issues that seems to be, in my experience, about the time when cities start looking to move to a Plan B form of government. That's really the summary of my presentation. I can stand and answer any questions now, or you can hear Dave's presentation, and we'll both take questions at the end. His will be far more interesting than mine.
Oh, let's hope so.
How many times?
You better have some good jokes.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute pleasure to be here in Carver. Thanks to the League of Women Voters for hosting this. Very much appreciated. There's an old Chinese curse. It says, "May you live in interesting times." And I would submit to you, I was a city manager for 30 years. I've been involved in local government for 40 years. And I submit to you, the times were always interesting. always interesting. Now, the one thing that I learned, the most important thing that I learned in my 30 years as a city manager is that trust facilitates the democratic process. Trust facilitates the democratic process. And I think if you have trust in government, in the democratic government that represents you, you can reduce complex things to their very essence and solve almost all difficult problems. The problem we've got today is trust is in short supply, very short supply. And on the local government level, I think we have an opportunity to continue to build trust and have that trust that allows us to solve these difficult problems. Now, the council manager form of government came into being primarily to increase trust in local government. The city manager form of government wanted to restore 4 things to government in the late 19th century. That was transparency in government. 2, engagement with the citizens. 3, effective performance and delivery of government services. And lastly, and probably most importantly, if you're a citizen, is accountability. Because democracy requires, in my view, accountability. Now, there's certain things that I think are critically important in local government for a government to be successful on a sustained basis. 1, you have to have strong political leadership. Strong political leadership. 2, you have to have effective policy development. I think that happens when you have strong administrative leadership and strong political leadership working together, developing good policies. 3, you have to have execution and results that people can see. Because ultimately, what are we trying to do? We, and I tried to do this my entire career, tried to make the lives of the people that lived in the jurisdiction that I worked better. That's my overriding goal, make lives better for American people. Transparent and ethical government is critically important to the trust component. And then lastly, it's important that we be able to recognize all segments of the community so that all segments of the community are treated fairly and equitably. I want to talk a little bit about the history of council manager government and some statistics. Number 1, more than 150 million Americans, almost half the population of our country, live in communities that operate under this form of government. Right now, as you see on the screen, about 49% of the almost 8,000 municipalities with a population over 2,500 have the council manager form of government. And 58% of those that are less than 100,000 people have the council manager form of government. And I think there's a reason for this. I think it's because of the flexibility of this form of government and the ability of that form of government to have that strong political leadership and still have that strong managerial and administrative leadership working together. Now, in February of 2011, IBM came out with a study, and they found in their study that cities that operate under the council manager form of government operate nearly 10% more efficiently than those that operate under, in this instance, the mayor-council form. And IBM said this, and I quote, "Investing executive authority and professional management shielded from direct political interference should yield more efficiently managed cities." And I believe that to be true based on my experience. Now, if you think about how council manager government was born, it started in 1908 in Stanton, Virginia. Okay, so that's 108 years ago that this form of government has been in existence. It was born out of the progressive movement because there was so much rampant corruption in local government at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. And it actually started with business people who were working with the National Municipal League, now called the National Civic League, got together and said, look, if we don't stop this corruption, our businesses are not going to thrive. We need to find a better way to do this. And so they came up with a number of experiments, with council manager government being one of the most important ones. And the whole concept, because it started with government, with business people, was that we're going to have this board of directors, just like a private corporation. We're going to have this board of directors with a chairman of the board, the mayor, and they're going to set the policy. And then we're going to hire a professional, just like a private sector corporation has a president of the corporation. We're going to have this city manager who's been trained to do this actually run the day-to-day operations. And those two groups working together are what are going to bring us out of this era of corruption. And if you ask me, what do I think are the most important pieces that came out of this? I believe it's consistent, reliable, trustworthy government for over 108 years. And I think the proof is definitely in the pudding. Now, what are the benefits of council manager government, in my opinion? Number one, I mentioned the flexibility. Number two, it does draw a clear distinction between the administrative role of the professional and the policy role of the elected body. And policy making is then concentrated in the entire governing body, which allows them to do really efficient strategic planning and policy development for the entire community. The organization is led by someone who has been trained to do this job. As you heard, I have a master's degree in public administration. I have an undergraduate degree in political science. The whole idea was to make sure that I was as efficient as I could be intellectually to operate as the chief administrative officer of the public corporation. And we have to have continuous learning. ICMA, Professional Association, we have over 11,000 members in 23 countries around the world. We mandate that our members have 40 hours of professional development every year. That's so we can be on top of the most innovative practices when bringing you your public services. Now, if you were the coach of a successful football or basketball team, you would work at the pleasure of the ownership of that team. That's basically what the city manager does. We work at the pleasure of the council who represents you, the ownership of this community. And if we don't do our job, a majority vote of that council can remove us. And that is one of the beautiful flexibilities of this form of government. But ultimately, what we are absolutely committed to do is to implement the vision for the community that the elected officials have based on their representation of the public and their constituents. And then we strive to provide efficient, effective, and equitable and ethical service delivery to the community. Now, ICMA was formed in 1914. 10 years after ICMA was formed, a code of ethics was put in place in 1924. That code of ethics has been active and efficient since 1924. And our code of ethics has 12 tenets. And we have to make sure that we adhere to those 12 tenets every minute of every day that we are on the job. Because, again, trust is critically important to the work we do and critically important, in my view, to the success of the local government. So I would say this last thing. The partnership between the elected officials and the professional city management leads me to this old saying that my mother taught me a long time ago. And I think this is really the beauty of this form of government and its flexibility. She would tell me over and over, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think this idea of the partnership between elected and appointed allows communities to go far together. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. And now, questions from the audience?
The present city administrator does not automatically become the city manager. The council needs to make a decision in terms of who it would appoint as the city manager. The council, if it so chose, could open it up for other applicants. That's a decision the council will make after, assuming the referendum passes.
But there's nothing, no ordinance or law says that we have to have competition for this.
There is none. I mean, it's a question it's a personnel hiring decision in the discretion of the council.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. It will not have any impact on the Planning Commission or the HPC when you move to if the city moves to Plan B. It won't change anything. There's a statutory procedure about appointment, but it isn't going to change the practical makeup or the function of either of those bodies. I can't tell you about Shakopee. I can tell you in Waconia, it's never gone to. The question's never been presented.
Other questions? Yep.
The practical answer is no. It will be seamless to everyone involved. Come on, somebody ask Dave a question. I can tell you that, to my knowledge, there is not presently any thought of that. I'm really not the right person to answer, Dave. You might have some anecdotal information on the deltas between city administrator and city manager pay.
I would say that many of the cities that go to council manager government do so because they think they can attain some economic efficiencies by doing so. So I think it works to the benefit of the community as opposed to the detriment. I think in this case where you already have a city administrator, I'd say it would probably be a seamless move from that administrator position to the same position, same professional position in a Plan B city.
And along those lines, I can tell you in my experience in working in communities that have moved from Plan A to Plan B, one of the reasons they do it is to ensure over a long-term basis they have the ability to attract the best and the brightest in terms of who their chief administrator is going to be. A gross generalization, but a highly skilled local government administrative professional that's looking at two positions in two competing communities, all other things being equal, is going to find the position where that individual is a manager as opposed to a city administrator much more attractive. Victoria was fairly recently. They were 5,000 to 6,000, I think, when they switched. And Chaska and Chanhassen have been Plan B cities for so long, I can't remember. I mean, long time ago.
You talked a lot about the benefits of the plan. Do we see any benefits in Plan A at this point with our population being
I don't, it's a pretty open-ended question, and I mean, it's not really, unfortunately for me, it's not really a legal question. I don't know if, I'm not trying to punt, Christie. It's not.
I think it.
a lot about the pros for Plan B, and are there pros to staying where we're at with the other option right now?
I think that lies completely within the understanding of the community members. You know, how do you want to be governed? How do you prefer to be governed? If you were going to take a corporation that you were in charge of, would you prefer to have a professionally trained person running the day-to-day operations of that corporation? That, fundamentally, that is the question. And I think that's up to all of you as to what you think is best for Carver. I happen to think it's definitely better to have that professional doing that job, but obviously I'm biased.
And you should know that I gave you some anecdotal, experiential information about when cities move. A city can become a Plan B city statutorily anytime its population exceeds 1,000. So that happened many, many years ago in Carver.
I'll tell you one quick story. I had a great professor in graduate school, and he was at one of these public forums, and someone said to him, "Could you tell me, in the most simplest terms, why we should have a city manager?" And so he told this story. He said, "You probably didn't know this, but in Paris, during the French Revolution, they had a city manager." Everybody looked at him like, "Are you a little off?" And he said, "No, this is my story." He said, "Just listen to me." He said, they were having this revolution, and they decided that the mayor, the city attorney, and the city manager were going to get beheaded. So they brought out this beautiful guillotine. They had this beautiful, just piece of machinery. And this guy comes out, and he's got this black hood over his head. And they call the mayor out first. They go, "Mr. Mayor, would you like to be face up or face down in the guillotine?" The mayor looks at him. He says, "I'm brave. I want to be face up." The mayor lays down on this marble slab, and the guy with the mask comes over, pulls the cord. Blade comes halfway down and stops. "Mr. Mayor, you are saved. Double jeopardy. Please ride your horse out of Paris." Mayor's gone. Next, they bring out the city attorney. "Mr. City Attorney, would you like to be face up or face down?" Well, of course, he goes, "I'm as brave as the mayor. I want to be face up." Guy pulls the cord. Blade comes halfway down and stops. "Mr. City Attorney, you are saved as well. Ride out of Paris." Gets on his horse, rides out of Paris. Now they bring out the city manager. City manager strides out. "Mr. City Manager, you know the drill. Face up or face down." Goes, "Of course, I want to be face up." So the city manager lays down on this marble slab. He looks up and he says, "I think I see the problem." and part of the beauty of this profession is we are mandated to be honest about hard realities. We have to be honest about hard realities. That's our history. That's our tradition. That is why the form of government was put into place. And so I think you've probably seen this with Brent, and you will continue to see it with him and others who may follow, that we are committed to being honest, transparent, and ethical in the work we do every day. And I think that the 108-year history of this form of government bears out that it does work. And I want you to know that there are huge cities in this country that have council manager government. There's San Antonio, there's Dallas, there's Fort Worth, there's San Jose. So this form of government doesn't only work in towns of 4,500 or 5,000. It works in very large, very complex, very political cities as well. So I think it's just something you all need to think about. Again, how do you want to be governed?
Any other questions? Okay. If not, I want to thank both of you very much. And also just to indicate that the League of Women Voters was very honored to be here this evening, but also to please indicate that our participation in this referendum presentation is not an endorsement of any position on the referendum itself. We also welcome you to stay, have a stretch. At 7 o'clock, we'll begin the forum for the candidates for City Council for the City of Carver. Thank you.